Hey, I guarantee you by the end of this lesson and from the last lesson, you're going to be a true champion at making elements using JavaScript and updating some of the properties contained within the elements. So creating and constructing a whole web content using JavaScript. And this, again, it's just an excellent exercise to get a lot of practice in building this same HTML using JavaScript. And I know it's a whole lot more lines of code, but trust me that once you get this practice in, you're never going to forget it. And you're going to be, whenever it comes to creating elements on the fly, it's going to be really easy to do. So going back into what we wanted to do next, and the next part of it is to create some buttons. So we need to have a whole dashboard area. So we've got the first two taken care of. So maybe we can just simply remove those, or we can just ignore that. And then we've got another div here, and this div contains the message, a bunch of buttons, and a whole bunch of interactions. So we're just going to call this the dashboard. So going back into game and dashboard. And that's why I really like to create one game object, because this allows me to create all the game content in one spot, and then I can easily access it for within the rest of the JavaScript really easily. So using doc, we're going to create another element, and this is just going to be our main div container. And then just to kind of close things off, before we complete, we're going to append it to the main game area. So do a refresh. And if we look at the source code, once again, we should have another div here. And this is going to be representing that third div with all of the content that is contained there. So that's the third div there. So the first one we need to do has a class of message for players. So that's the next one that we need to create. And this is going to be just called game message, we can call that. Or we'll call it game status instead. And this is our spot to provide status updates to the player. So creating another div using class list, adding in a class. And the class that we want to add in is just called message. And we'll update the style sheet after this lesson. And then game status, we want to add in some text content into there. So using text content, and this is an equal. So message for player. And then down below, we can do game dashboard because it's contained within dashboard. So dashboard is going to be the parent of it. That's why we're using append. And order here does matter, because when you're appending, then it's going to simply drop it into the next available slot. So it's going to be simply appending it over. So if you want to make sure that you have it in the correct order, then make sure that the append is being done in the order that you want to represent the elements. So if you always to have one and then move it around, using the append in a different spot, then I potentially would have a different spot where the elements would be structured. So now we've got message for player, and we see that it's popping up there. So it's not exactly as we need it, because it's popping up above the table, and whereas the HTML has it below. And that's because I want to append the dashboard to the table and not to the main area. So let's do a quick refresh. So that moved the message for player down. And that's what I was saying, that the order is important, that we want to make sure that we do get the order proper. Now let's create some buttons, as the next elements are all a bunch of buttons with a class of btn. So we can do some copy and paste for these ones. So in this case, we want to create an element, and the element that we're creating is not going to be a div, but it's going to be a button. And let's add in some text to it. So add in text content onto the button. And this one's going to say deal. And we're going to add the event listeners afterwards. And then game btn deal. And using class list, just as we did before, let's add the class of btn. And then for the game dashboard, we're going to append the game btn deal to the dashboard. And save. So that gives us the deal button. And we can do the same format for the hit and for the stand. So let's copy out this, and we'll just do a quick update of the names. So this will be the button hit. Update the text content as well, button hit, and make sure that we update the button hit. So now we've got the hit button. And we don't have the exact same styling, so let's just make sure that we're adding it And then we have one more button. So this one is button stand. So give this one an object btn stand. And this will allow us to easily identify them later on. Move this dashboard up here so that the order once again is proper. And let's double check our HTML. So save and make sure that the buttons are added properly. So we've got the 3 buttons and then we have the same 3 buttons here. And as we can see, they are button tags. So button. And then below that, we've got another div with a class of message, an input with a type of number, and then also another button for the bet amount. So let's add those in as well. And this is all going into the dashboard. So creating a button, and this will be a bet button. So we'll just update the whole object name there. And this actually has to come after the input and as well after the message. So let's set up that game message. And this is going to contain the player's cash amount. So using the document, create element, create a div to hold that information. And then game player cash using class list, let's add the class of message. And then add it into the dashboard. So append game player cash. Then we could do game player cash text content and then equal that to be the same text content that we see below. Then we've got the bet amount. So last thing we need to do is still add an input. So let's create that input before we add the button. And yes, we are coming to the end. So this is going to be all the construction of all the elements that we need. So input bet using document, create element. We're creating an input tag. And then for game input bet, let's set some attributes for it. And setting the attribute type, because this is going to be an input area. Set it to be number, and then I'll add it to the dashboard so that we can see as we're constructing it what it's going to look like. So we still need to apply some styling to it. And in this case, we're going to do the styling manually. So we're not going to add in a class, just so we do get some more practice for it. So input bet, and then style, and then the style property. So we're going to have width, and the width can be 4EM. So that will update what the width is. And instead of width, we can do the font size. And this can be 1.4 EM. So that will match with what we've got below. And let's do a margin at the top. So set margin top to be equal to 1 EM. So we've got some spacing near the top. And you can also set the value of the element using value. And we're going to set it to be 0. So it's going to be a number 0 value because this is a number type. So setting it to 0. And that's it. So now that we've constructed our game area to look exactly like the HTML, we can get rid of the HTML and we can move on to some more fun stuff with JavaScript. So selecting all the HTML, we can remove it from the project and it's going to make our interface look a lot cleaner. So we're ready to move on to the next part where we're going to apply some functionality to the JavaScript. We're going to make these buttons do stuff as well as build the deck of cards and so on. So that's still coming up in the next lessons.